A return to the normal is unsustainable. Let's face future and collectively restore ʻāina aloha. Imagine this: white sandy beaches, perfect balmy weather, and surf experts that will take you out for a canoe ride and invite you for a surf lesson. This brand trifecta of sand, surf, and sun has made Hawaii the premier exotic destination for travelers seeking respite, recreation, and an opportunity to realize their fantasy of a hula dancer in a grass skirt with swaying hips, big smile, serving up cold, refreshing Mai Tais. But isn't that idyllic Hawaii, the one filled with generosity and aloha, supposed to be served up to any visitor? Because aloha is what I owe you as a paying traveler. Shouldn't aloha be available at one's beck and call? This may have been a version of Hawaii that was a part of my grandparents' generation. And don't get me wrong, not all of it was misappropriation of Hawaiian and local culture. But let's consider the cost of an over-reliant local economy, which depends on tourism as its #1 economic driver in the face of a global pandemic. Fact 1, according to a local news source, the median price for a single family home on Oahu hit $992,500 in July 2021. That's way up from just a year before. The president of the Honolulu Board of Realtors said this: "We're seeing these record high median sales prices because inventory in the affordable and mid-range brackets is dwindling." Fact 2, according to a recent economic report, Honolulu's cost of living is 88% higher than the national average when accounting for housing, groceries, utilities, and transportation. And as a Hawaii County community with 200,000 residents, we need to heed the tale of Honolulu's inaffordability and be vigilant about ensuring affordable living for Hawaii County residents by better understanding the root causes of current economic dysfunction that rewards conventional, unchecked economic growth at the expense of economic justice and equity. Fact 3, Carl Bonham, director of the Economic Research Organization at the University of Hawaii, and one of the state's top economists, is predicting that Hawaii will see a significant migration of residents to the continental US over the next 2 years as people seek jobs. He also stated at a recent legislative hearing to expect that Hawaii will recover from the pandemic slower than other states. The facts tell us this: sadly, the everyday working class resident is being outpriced of a fair and decent living. In this current economic downturn, one can easily feel despair. What possibly can be done? Perhaps we should quickly convert agricultural lands into affordable housing developments. Perhaps we should ask to loosen all travel restrictions to aid tourism in its recovery. Or perhaps we might return to indigenous wisdom and models to renew an economy towards innovation and resilience, shifting away from extractive consumerism that have resulted in a widening economic divide and disheartening environmental and cultural degradation. Our economy is the driver of climate change, and only by recalibrating our economy will we save our planet. Crisis opens the door to opportunity, and we have a rare opportunity to shift mindsets and advance plans for a stronger and more sustainable Hawaii, one founded on ʻāina aloha, a deep and abiding love for Hawaii's communities and natural environments. I'm here today to offer a new vision for economic transformation by sharing about a community-led initiative called Aloha Economic Futures, which aspires to return to generative mindsets, and the innovation of just and regenerative economies that minimize harm to the environment, fosters equity and justice, and are guided by Hawaiʻi cultural principles. These principles are ʻāina aloha. We are of and from this ʻāina that ultimately sustains us. We employ strategies for economic development that place our kuleana to steward precious, limited resources in a manner that ensures our long-term horizon as a viable island people and place. O puali'i. Our leaders understand that their privilege to lead is directly dependent on those they serve, from the most vulnerable to the most privileged. We seek to regenerate an abundance that provides for everyone. Decision makers understand and embrace their duty and accountability to community. Our social, economic, and government systems engage and respond to a collective voice in integrative ways to balance power and benefit. Imi oi kela kela. We are driven by creativity and innovation, constantly challenging the status quo. We are mindful and observant of needs, trends, and opportunities, and seek new knowledge and development opportunities in ways that enhance our way of life without jeopardizing our foundation of ʻāina aloha. And finally, hoʻokipa. We are inclusive and embrace the collective that will call Hawaiʻi, our beloved Hawaii, home. Grounded in the fundamental understanding that it is our kuleana to control and manage our resources in a way that allows us to fulfill our role as hosts here in our beloved homeland. To achieve a new normal for Hawaiʻi with thriving environments and equitable opportunities for our residents, we collectively call for investment in whole systems transformation. And through an ongoing process of community engagement, Aloha Economic Futures is forwarding a community-created vision for our economy and empowering leadership accountable to that vision as we set a course together for a stronger Hawaiʻi. We invite you to learn more about our 4-step process at ʻāina-based.com. Through this process, we flipped the conventional top-down approach of gathering input for a bureaucratic top-heavy plan to a bottoms-up approach that was responsive, interactive, and nimble. We saw amazing results. To date, over 2,700 individuals and organizations have signed on to the declaration, and nearly 200 community proposals have been shared with possible solutions covering diverse sectors, such as sustainable and resilient food systems, creating circular economies, health and wellness, as well as community and participatory-based governance. Moreover, and to our surprise, Maui, Kauai, Honolulu, and Hawaii counties have all adopted the Aloha Economic Futures Declaration by their respective county councils and are working to incorporate and integrate the principles and frameworks into county-level decision-making. We are also encouraged that the Hawaii Tourism Authority, the state agency responsible for managing tourism and balancing it with community and environmental well-being, adopted the declaration and worked the principles into their strategic plan. Grassroots communities and small businesses, too, have adapted and have improved upon the process to bring about enhanced community cohesion and priority goal setting. One such example is Hawaii Green Growth, our United Nations Local 2030 hub, applying both AAEF tools and the Aloha Plus Challenge in a massive public-private project to better care for the multiple ahupua'a that comprise the Alawai watershed, home to Waikiki. Again, you can learn more about the assessment tools and rubrics we developed at ʻāina-based.com. We welcome organizations, agencies, and community coalitions to adapt these tools to help them align toward a more just equitable, and resilient ʻāina aloha future. But why change metrics or the tools for how we should measure? After all, how can we be sure this would have any long-lasting effect at all? I look to the nation of Bhutan, which transformed itself by measuring economic development by a gross national happiness index instead of by a gross domestic product index through its 4 pillars of sustainable and equitable socio-economic development, environmental conservation, preservation and promotion of culture, and good governance. I also look to the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, an internationally recognized organization that produced a Better Life Index that creates economic measures that gives greater credence to people's current and future well-being over how fast an economy's output, regardless of environmental or social harm that may be caused. In the context of an island community and an ailing island Earth, shouldn't we measure what really matters? We call for the development of a new, refined, enlightened dashboard informed by broad community input to help steer towards a collective vision of economic prosperity and to diminish unfavorable market forces and system conditions that lead to status quo injustice and inequities. We must act. So much is at stake. July 2021 was the hottest month ever recorded. According to NOAA, global temperatures in July 2021 were higher than any other July on record, making it likely the hottest month the world has ever seen since records began in 1880. 11% of all global greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans are due to deforestation, comparable to the emissions from all of the passenger vehicles on the planet. 800 million people, 11% of the world's population, is currently vulnerable to climate change impacts, such as droughts, floods, heat waves, extreme weather events, and sea level rise. And the projections for the effects of climate change on Hawaii's island ecosystems are even more dire. On most islands, increased temperatures coupled with decreased rainfall will reduce the amount of fresh water available for drinking and crop irrigation. Warmer oceans are already leading to increased coral bleaching and disease outbreaks and threatening fisheries. One thing is abundantly clear. More of the same profit maximization at all costs thinking and decision-making will create more of the same outcomes. I believe in our collective intelligence, and I believe in the ingenuity of my ancestors. Let's cease to evaluate our local economic position based on a continentally framed report card. Let's steer away from macroeconomic measures that translate to each business cutting costs to achieve the highest possible short-term profits with little regard to ʻāina and communities' health and resilience in the long term. Let's care for and understand Hawaii's complex political history as systems of American imperialism and white settler colonialism continue to promote modern cultural erasure of Native Hawaiians. Let's amplify and back accountable local leaders that will work to redesign systems that are failing the most vulnerable environments and ohana. So here's my call to adventure. To achieve a new normal for Hawaiʻi with thriving environments and equitable opportunities for our residents, we as champions of the AAEF movement collectively call forth visible and accountable processes that honors local community leadership and input by forwarding a community-created Hawaii values-driven vision for our economy and empowering leadership accountable to that vision as we set a course together for Hawaii's transition, led and grounded by timeless Hawaii principles. In doing so, together, over time, we would achieve a collective vision of healthy environments and thriving communities by recalibrating behaviors and conditions that better reflect and mimic ʻāina. To close, I turn back the pages of my younger years. I too remember Waikiki, where the Beach Boys would take you on a canoe ride or let you use a rental longboard for a few additional hours, or aunties would give you a small snack because you were hanging out at the beach all day and looked like you never eat. So here's a part of the story, or reciprocity equation, that's lesser known. I would spend a good portion of my summers at Waikiki, yes, surfing and playing, but also to visit my hardworking grandmother at the iconic Moana Surfrider Hotel where she was employed. I was cared for and shown aloha, partly because my grandmother spoke to her friends and made sure that I was looked after, and partly because I showed respect to the kama'aina and kupa of Waikiki. I would help them put boards away or distribute boards to customers if it looked like they would benefit from extra kokua. Aloha was given because it was shared reciprocally. And more importantly, the exchange between humans reflected how the ʻāina and kai of Manoa Ahupua'a worked in concert to sustain and regenerate itself. I know Hawaii can take on seemingly insurmountable complex challenges, even as the most geographically isolated set of islands in the world, so long as there is a unifying vision that calls upon our inherent gifts, excellence, and shared kuleana by all that call this place their beloved home. We know this is possible. The voyaging canoe Hokulea proved this to us in 1976 on her maiden voyage and every voyage thereafter. The people of Hawaii proved this when the vast majority of residents pitched in to make sure that at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, that neighbors had something to eat, kupuna were checked on, and once again, the community became the primary educators of our kamali'i, our youth. Let's work together, you and I, you and your neighbors, company to company, agency to agency, island to island, nation to nation around the world. Let's refocus on what really matters. Enduring, resilient health of our ʻāina reflected in our communities. Eia Hawaiʻi, he lama ku, he ʻāina aloha.